the collapse of the communist parties in Western countries. For example, Italian Communist Party was very, very strong, and after collapse of USSR, they changed their name for the Democratic Party or something like this. So it was totally catastrophe. One day you have big Communist Party, and few weeks later it's disappeared. What is your and in the same time, for example, in India, there was not these processes. There was strong communist parties, and these communist parties exist today. And in the state of the Kerala Communist Party of India, Marxists, they took a power. So why?
I think that there couldn't be a communist party without the working class. And if your working class is not active, if it is not seeing itself as a class, when there's no class mentality, class consciousness, it doesn't matter how active or explicit your communist movement is, it doesn't have legs to stand on. So what happened in Italy, in Poland, and in the Soviet Union itself was the deactivation of the working class consciousness. Why was it happening? Because of the reasons that we discussed already. There were numerous factors that we should take a look at, and none of them is most important. They are all important. For example, in the Second World War, if we are talking about Russia, the Communist Party was mortally wounded. There were millions of communists who perished on the battlefields. More than 8 million of Soviet communists didn't see the victory in this war. And this was a very serious blow to the communist movement as a whole, in general. But this is, again, one of the reasons. In order to have a stable and revolutionary movement, you need to base this movement on the active and revolutionary working class. Without such a class, which sees itself as a class and sees such struggle as essential and inevitable, without it, there will be no party, and there couldn't be any party that won't be opportunistic and that won't eventually either dissolve and disappear or join ranks with the bourgeoisie.
Okay, so now I will ask you a question about party. I want to ask you about your strategy for the future. What do you think about the communist parties in Russia? Do you belong to any party? If not, why? Are you going to create a party? Don't you think that having such a great popularity, you should, as Lenin disciple, move to party activity? Or maybe you think that today the struggle for socialism should run differently than in the times of the Bolsheviks?
I don't think that we can substitute this class consciousness with a YouTube channel with 500,000 subscribers. This is not enough. And if you take a look at other YouTube channels in the Russian segment of this magnificent network, you'll see that we are not the most populous. There are many other projects, and the Russian capitalists, the Russian liberals have way more supporters, for starters. And secondly, I think that we cannot substitute the absence of this movement with enormous activity on the web. This is not enough. We cannot recreate the working class movement through creation of the party. That's not how it works. The working class is going to raise its head again, and I'm absolutely sure that it will happen. It is already happening somewhere, maybe not here. And the very position of Russia in the global chain of production now makes this a very problematic and painful equilibrium for us, because the number of working class people in Russia is diminishing. Not to say that the whole population of Russia is slowly decreasing, but inevitably and constantly. So we are now no longer a producing country. We are not India or China or Brazil. We are the country which is gaining 60 or 70% of its export income through selling our mineral resources to the imperialist metropoly. So the working class is in a very despicable situation here. It is shrinking, but there are still working class people here in millions. The problem is that they are not seeing themselves as ones. The problem is that the working class in Russia, and not only in Russia, I may guess, is injected, is poisoned with the bourgeois mentality, where there should be working class mentality, where there should be working class consciousness. There is petty bourgeois consciousness, and that's not very good. A very good situation to start a party, to restart a party. So I'm sure that times will change, and it's not up to a single personality or a single YouTube channel or any sort of a disciple, as you named it. We are not talking about religion here. That's not how it works. Not even 12 disciples would save the Russian Revolution or whatever other revolution there could be. It totally depends on the situation in the global economy, on the current state of affairs in each and every particular capitalist state, on the unemployment, on the everyday conditions in which the working class is destined to live and survive. And only when the conditions for the working class make it impossible for the workers to be inactive, to be apathetic, only then we will see the situation changed and the gates of opportunities opened for us. And up until then, and I don't think that it will take decades for us to see such a change in history, but up until then, I think that the most important task for all of us is to multiply and expand the propaganda, to the efforts in propaganda. We should be visible. We should talk to the layers of society that were previously completely close to us, isolated from us. And if you may want to to look for a comparison. I think that we could see some similarities with what had been happening in the mid 19th century in Russia or in other countries, when there were, I mean, the big capitalist crises were still ahead of Russia in the 19th century. The Marxist movement was in its initial stages. There were no countrywide strikes. There were no political parties at that moment. But Marxists did not establish parties. They did not create the movement of the masses. The masses began to move and fight for themselves. And that's when the theoreticians of the 19th century became politicians. That's when Lenin and his disciples arrived. So I think that we cannot change the course of history. We cannot substitute the objective factors with our subjective expectations or willings. And we need to accommodate our propaganda to the tasks and necessities of every moment we live in. And the current situation requires that we focus on propaganda solely, so that we enlarge and expand. And when the moment comes, our ranks will be not as they were before. We should grow in numbers. That's, I think, the most important task now.